I'm just not,
I think it's
bad enough,
Well, just again to nickel and dime, you got an increase of $2,000 for the fees for the board attorney. That ought to be cut back. No rate increase there. The $40,000 sounds like that's your cushion for the proposed litigation. To the extent that includes a rate increase, tell them forget it. We're not paying it. Fees for the board, it appears, if I'm reading this correctly, you've gone from $2,380 to the addition of $3,570 plus $29. If that's the case, John, that explains a large part of the difference, because you're now looking at $6,400 versus $23. I don't know why that's the increase. That'd be something we would look at.
Yeah, and that again is what I'm trying to get a handle on. Ordinarily, when I look at these things, I can pretty quickly identify where the increases are, and it's not happening for me on this analysis. I need, look, the message that has to come out of these meetings is, I'm not interested in hearing you justify how important each and every expense is. The dialogue's different. The dialogue has to be, where are the cuts? And to come in here, Bob, and have me on the first two go-rounds come up with gaps that we can't explain is in any budget process unacceptable. In this one is even more so. And we're going to be banging and drilling on this stuff.
I understand. I guess one of the problems with the planning and zoning budgets was that we have an employee in transition right now, and I'll try to throw more detail out of it, but didn't get much when we started.
Which doesn't affect the numbers, affects the preparation of the sheets, like what you tell me. Yeah. So, again, I view this, you need to hear from us where we are, we need to hear from you where you are. It's a preliminary exchange. Tighten them up and get them back to us.
Unfortunately, you have some time. You have at least a month.
I think on the detail, the columns do.
They hit up.
One adds up to 45. It looks like, as you look across left to right, it doesn't make sense, but if you go down and add them up, it's there.
Right, okay.
So,
I'll definitely clean it up and try to get it back to you in a more understandable format.
And would you check the arithmetic also, just
I'll
to
do what
make
I can.
sure?
Yeah. These spreadsheets are tricky, but I will check
I'm
them.
assuming that the detail pages flows to the summary page, so
Right.
you make a change.
Yeah, it's
So-
just
The
an
math-
Excel
Yeah, so I
spreadsheet.
think the numbers are.
The math works, just the
Yeah.
format is probably a little confusing,
Yeah.
but the math
Right,
is on
just
target.
talk to me, so I better it's not readily apparent to me how that increase arises.
Okay.
And I'd like to know.
Okay.
I haven't even gotten to the point where I've told you definitively that you're out of line for asking the increase. At the moment, I simply want to understand why you're asking for an increase.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, Bob, you will work on that one more and bring the numbers back to us.
I'm taking notes as we go along.
Thank you. 195, construction code.
Just, Jeannie, one other thing before we get to that, if I
Okay.
could. Again, I'm going to, give the excuse that I'm the new guy. Will we see a borough budget at some point in the process? Okay. I thought John's suggestion was a good one to at least explore, pulling out of all these separate independent, separate department budgets, the legal expenses, and putting that in a legal budget or a legal category under the borough budget, just so we can see it all together.
We can do that. There's a couple complications. One is the borough attorney's contract's been executed. That's our largest expenditure. The planning board and the board of adjustment attorney by state law are hired by the boards directly. We have a statutory obligation to fund the commitment they make. We don't hire that party. We don't set their compensation. Anything that we had the input on, like municipal prosecutor, public defender, any of those attorneys, we renewed them at the 2007 hourly rate. And all our consultants that were reauthorized at the reorganization meeting on January 1st, which was your first meeting, so I know it's a blur that day, were all renewed at the 2007 rate, and that was a condition of their continued employment, is that they had to hold the line to the rate they started with in 2007. So we've been pretty firm with them saying,
Okay.
this is a tough economy. If you want the business, this is the rate we're paying, and if you want an increase, you're not going to work for us. And so we've been pretty consistent with that. The flexibility has been on borough attorney and these two board attorneys who provide good service, but we don't control their compensation, unfortunately, is by state law.
And all I was trying to capture was perhaps in the borough budget, this, anticipated litigation line that's above and beyond what we fixed as Joe's contract as borough attorney and what the two land use boards established as comp for their attorneys in the ordinary course.
Well, just with that specific example, shouldn't that be in the borough budget as opposed to these?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Just the reserve for the
Oh,
potential.
and that was my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd like, rather than having it reflected in the land use board's budgets. I think I'd rather see that, if it's possible, and I defer to Ray and Robert on that, have it in a general borough budget, so we
I would agree.
understand better why we have the additional expense, and we're not scrambling trying to figure it out within the context of a land use board's budget.
If we continue along the path that we've chosen here with the individual budgets, though, I could certainly put more information in the line items such as reserve for legal expenses associated with pending litigation. I suppose that would give more information as to what that particular legal.
I'm less concerned at the moment, Bob. I'm less concerned. I understand the rationale, and I'm not sure. But I think, given the rationale, I don't want it as an allocated reserve for either the planning board or the zoning board. I'd rather have that as a reserve at the borough level.
And I think that's fine with us.
So I guess at the end of the day, we control it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I want to make sure that we appropriately allocate it. Because
Robert, you have a comment on that?
Let me ask the auditor on pursuing that. It would be a change in the formats. It would be changed to the budget document. Let me get his opinion.
And I think it's almost a one-off. I mean, this is not a common problem where we A, anticipate litigation, but B, we're not sure whether it's the borough, one or both of the land use boards, that's going to be involved in the litigation itself. And what Ray's tried to do is anticipate the fees that we're going to incur, create sufficient flexibility so we don't run into problems if after the fact we have to seek relief from the expenditure cap. But, and also simultaneously to send a signal that we're not walking away from the litigation, which I think is valid as well. But I'm just not sure that under these circumstances, it's appropriate to have that reserve spread among 1, 2, or 3 different budgets. I think I'd rather see it consolidated into one budget. And my request would be that it be consolidated under borough legal anticipated litigation, separate and apart from Joe's contract, so there's no confusion there. But again, I think the deal we cut with Joe specifically stated that litigation would be handled apart from his retainer for providing services as a municipal attorney.